All right, Paul.
Hey, Fab.
I got the intro flawlessly this time.
I see that. I'm very impressed.
Thank you. How's it going?
Good. You?
Good. Thank you. All right. So today, I know we talked about this episode a while ago, and we're finally going to do it because I felt we had to talk about a few things before. So there is process to this madness of the episodes that we publish. Two, I've called it the ultimate sales and marketing process.
Ooh.
I don't know how ultimate it is, but we talked a lot about the sales process. Obviously, a couple episodes ago or a few episodes ago we talked about the marketing process. So now I wanted to see if we could try to make them work together. And the reason is because there's multiple reasons, but one of them is obviously like sales and marketing are still often conflictual groups and departments, even though they are all trying to achieve the same goal, which is revenue for the company. Sales obviously tends to be at the latter end of it. Marketing tends to be at the top of it. And so there's different competencies and skills and so and that. And so, but I think a big way to address that is by having a common process. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to talk to you about that today.
Yep. I think it's true. I'm not a marketing expert by all means, but the more I talk to you, the more I get to learn. But it's interesting because, marketing is something that touches has a lot of different aspects and a lot of spokes in its wheel. And of course, as a salesperson,
mm-hmm.
A sales professional, when you're in a company, all you care about marketing is how they can help you make your sales process easier, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's with lead generation or lead nurturing or whatever it might be, that's really what you're concerned with. Of course, you're happy when the company does a good branding exercise and people know about you, and that because that can lead to a form of lead generation, right?
Mm-hmm.
If the company's well known. If you're working for Google or Microsoft, well, they're well known. It makes it a lot easier when you're calling someone up and say, "Hey, it's Paul from Google." Well, it's marketing. It's also obviously just brand recognition from being used a lot. But in most B2B situations, let's be really honest. Your efforts, the efforts that are going to help your sales team are either lead generation or lead nurturing as you go along in your sales process.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, when you're at stage 0 and you're looking, you're either marketing hands you a lead, says here, you guys called in and downloaded some information and left their phone number and a name, to get some great information. So qualified lead, right? So you're calling them. That's great. You want a lot of those. It makes it a lot easier when you call someone, and I think that's the basic start. So to me,
I think you said something really great there on the marketing side of things, is that, ultimately, and I used to say a long time ago, and maybe it was a little, maybe a little too sarcastic. So I've changed how I present it. But to me, the role of marketing ultimately, so what I used to say is to make sales seamless so that people they know your brand, the leads come in, they're ready to talk to sales and this and that. And I realized that seamless kind of devalues a bit what salespeople devalues too much what salespeople do. So I try to say, like, marketing's role is really to make sales easier, right? And yes, the lead generation, the nurturing, and making sure that sales are talking to the best inbound contacts possible. That's one thing, but branding is also another. And I'll disagree with you a bit on the B2B thing. I'm sure if you're in an industry where there's 4 competitors, chances are everybody knows you. But, branding plays a lot when you're in B2B as well, especially if you're in a more competitive space and whatnot. So branding is important there too. So you're right. I think that's step 1 is marketing's role should really be about making sales easier. I think if you're not doing that, then I think your marketing is flawed somewhere.
I of course, coming from the sales angle, totally agree. And you're right. I think your marketing is flawed if it's not aiding your growth, right?
Yeah.
Call it what you will, right? We call it sales and we say helping salespeople, but really, if it's helping people buy the product online, then it's doing its job. Marketing is there ultimately, and we said this recently, if you don't have some kind of revenue growth objective tied to marketing, you're floating in space, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Unless, and I'll put a caveat here, unless you're looking to get funding, you're a new company that's just looking for funding. You're not even looking to make money. You're just doing marketing so that people know about you, so that they want to invest in you. And that's
right.
That's also revenue.
That is also revenue, right? I mean, obviously,
exactly. It's an investment.
Yeah, I mean, there's things will change and whatnot depending on how where you're at your company, even what type of company. Right? Obviously, a software as a service company will have a different reality than a industrial plumbing company. So there are some there's some variability, but ultimately, I think sales and marketing fulfill similar roles. I mean, it's executed differently. You maybe report on things differently. Your sales process might not the steps, but maybe what needs to get done to get to the next step changes a bit and stuff like that. So that's a great intro. Let's get into the nitty gritty of it. I think let's try right here to map the two. To me, I think the best place to start is at the end. Ironically, I think you need to know what you're trying to achieve, right? Because otherwise, all roads lead to Rome. Right? If you don't know where you're going, every way is going to seem like a decent way. So I don't know how you start, but do you think a good place to start is like kind of your revenue objective for the year, or let's call it a year?
Well, here's the thing. You have to think globally about what you're hoping to achieve, right? So let's just throw a number out there. Let's say your company makes $100 million a year in revenue, in sales.
Yeah.
And you're hoping, or overall revenue, and you're saying, well, we'd like to grow this year by 20% based on a bunch of factors, data and this is research.
Yeah.
And then you say, the market can handle it. But obviously now the next step is, what do we need to do to get there, right?
Yeah.
So yes, you need to start at the end, but I don't call it the end. It's part of the beginning. So really it's saying, what is the growth that we hope to get? And now let's calculate to see if it's logical. Because there's two ways, and I'm going to do a little parentheses here. There's two ways of calculating what your objective should be.
Yeah.
There's the CEO, the president, that sit down and say, we look at the market, we look at our product, we'd like to have a 20% growth, right?
Yeah.
And then there's a way that I've been, that I used to fight for when I was a salesperson, saying, or even a sales manager in a company, saying, hey, look, let's look at what we sold last year. Let's see what the market conditions are like with the clients that we have, what we think we grow, and let's use that as the target. Now, traditionally, the ownership always says they want a higher target than what the salespeople say. Now, in a very mature industry that I used to work in was media, it was saturated to the gill.
Yeah.
I'm talking pre-Facebook and pre-Google, but 10 years ago, before they really started making a dent.
Yeah.
It was saturated to the gill. I mean, it was just like, to get 1% market share, you have to go steal it from someone else. It was not a growth industry. So obviously in that world, you had to balance both things. You couldn't just pull out there and you say, hey, look, it's like the 1940s in broadcasting, we're just going to grow by 30% this year. It didn't.
Yeah.
Now, in most other industries, like, where there's room for growth, you can be a little more cavalier, but then you need to back up and create the sales and marketing process to get there, right? So so let's say you have that number, 20% growth, $5 million this year. Okay, perfect. So how are we going to get there? That's where you say, well, okay, what does marketing do? How are they going to generate the interest, either from the people who are going to do, inbound buying, and to the others who are going to be using this in the sales department to really grow the business. So that's where stage 0, you're talking marketing, saying, okay, how are you guys going to generate leads for us? Right? That's the part. Now, that's interesting. The part, and I think that's a little more, I don't want to say simple. It's simple to understand. It's simple to do, but it's simple to understand. Say, okay, marketing is going to go put some stuff out there, talk to my B2B clients, and they're going to call in, or they're going to email in, or they're going to They're going to look at their website. They're going to download stuff. They're going to do so. Boom, they become a qualified lead. That's awesome. Yeah. And that's, I think that's easy to understand. And then boom, I pass it off to salespeople and they close it. Mm-hmm. Where I think it becomes a little more complex is after stage 1 of the sales process. Mm-hmm. Where does marketing come in? How do they keep nurturing the people that maybe weren't ready to buy yet, the people who are not 100% sure? Like, how do they keep nurturing that interest other than being bombarded on Facebook every time I look at a website? How do you do it properly to nurture and make that grow? And that, to me, is where those processes are similar, right? So you're calling the salesperson, the human is calling, reaching out, email, LinkedIn, whatever form of business social media you're using, or whatever form you're using. And then and that's where I want to ask you, how do you see that next process of nurturing or having a reach out, I don't know if you call it a soft reach out from a non-human in form of advertising or marketing upgrade or upsell or.
Nice. Yeah. So basically I think, I think we need to back step a bit, and I'll get to it, but I think once you know your revenue goal, and correct me if it doesn't make sense on the sales side, I think, for marketing, because ultimately, although there are strategies to reach out to companies as a whole and different stakeholders within the company, ultimately we think in terms of contacts and number of companies and stuff like that. And so I think the in-between step is to identify kind of now that you have your revenue target, there's maybe you want to subdivide it more, like what you believe salespeople can do on their own, like through prospecting and referrals and whatnot. And so then you have your chunk, what you feel marketing needs to get done. But then you kind of need to translate it, if you want, from revenue to a certain number, right? Like number of companies usually. So what's your average kind of sale? So then you probably have like a target company that you want, right? A target number of company that you want to sign for the year. And then you kind of backtrack, and a bit what we talked about, right? You backtrack your sales process, your conversion rates, and then you get into the marketing process, right? And so at the end of the day, you want marketing to know, okay, I need to generate, 1,000 like new leads a month, let's say, or a quarter or whatever, depending on what your number is what your number is. And like we were talking about during the marketing process episode, then you need to make sure that sales and marketing agree on that handover, because the handover process is probably the most difficult, right? Because it's where you probably risk losing a lot of your leads, because if marketing has their thing down pat and sales has their thing down pat, but there's that disconnect in between, that can make it really difficult for the prospect. So I think once marketing knows how many they need to generate, they need to understand what a qualified lead is. And it has to be objective. I used to say it has to, as much as possible, be objective, but it has to be objective, right? There's no choice, because the second it stops being objective is the second politics gets involved, right? And so the second sales are doing well, then everybody, it's because of sales that sales are doing well, and then marketing is like, no, it's because of marketing that marketing's doing well, and that sales are doing well. And the second things are not going well, then it's everybody's fault. So that qualified lead needs to be very objective. And then marketing can go, okay, well, now we have these contacts. We know we need to generate 1,000. And from those 1,000, we need to generate, let's say, 800 qualified ones.
Can I make you pause there a second?
Yeah.
What do you mean by that marketing lead needs to be objective? What do you mean by objective?
The definition of a qualified lead has to be objective. So, too often when you ask, too often, I don't know. I'm being too marketer-y, but you don't want it to be like, somebody who's ready to buy, because that's
so you're saying objective in a way that it's detailed. So it needs
you want somebody who's ready to buy. How are we going to qualify that? How are we going to determine that somebody's ready to buy, right? Because what happens otherwise is that marketing then goes into what they believe is qualified. So, they've visited our website 3 times and they've opened 7 emails, but if sales is like, no, ready to buy means they have the budget and they're at the right level in the organization, and they identified, let's say, one need, like you're obviously speaking two completely different languages, right? Marketing is going to be like, well, this person visited the website 17 times. They're so qualified.
Well, that's totally key. And I agree with you, Fab. I think that's where you have to sit down and say, okay, what are we going to call? Because qualified can mean, that was my next point, qualified can mean so many different things. Like you said, it's great that they, that they opened 7 emails and that they, looked at the website 3 times, but they're qualified in the sense that they've opened the website, they've gone to the website 3 times and opened 7 emails, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're qualified at another level. So you're totally right. I think the objectives in being objective have to be very, very detailed. So exactly. What is it? So, okay. So maybe marketing says they have to have been on the website 3 times. They've opened 7 leads, and then sales says, okay, they're qualified enough for me to call them.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that they're ready to buy. And I don't think it's funny because unless, and you're going to say, oh, you might not like this, but I don't. If you're doing any kind of handoff, the only person that can really judge, because they're asking more questions, if you haven't gone through the whole process, marketing, accounting, sales doesn't know if they're really qualified to buy until you've gone through the whole sales process.
And you're right. And that's why you need those objective criteria, because the danger, and you need to be realistic, right? Like marketing will never send you a lead that will buy for sure. Like a lot of salespeople are like, I want leads only that are going to buy. And like, well, no, because you still have your sales process to go through. But for you to add a lead to your stage 0 that you've talked about a few times, right, in your sales process, what do you need, right? Well, I need a person that's, a decision maker. So maybe a C-suite, maybe director if the company's a little smaller. And I need them to have X number of revenue or X number of, like, depending on what you sell. Like I had a client once, it was number of employees that count, right? Because smaller companies didn't fit for them employee-wise. And so you need to have this thing so that marketing is like, okay, so for us, a marketing qualified lead, according to marketing, a qualified lead is somebody who's, C-suite or director, and who has X number of revenue and has X number of employees, and that's identified one need. Can we agree that if I send you that, you're willing to talk to them? Yes. And then your stage 0 is a stage where maybe you validate that need and stuff like, right, because people, lie on forms or misunderstand forms or go quickly or whatnot. But at least the definition is clear, so that if sales is like, the leads you're sending me are not good. Okay, well, let's review our definition. Well, all the directors you sent me are not good. Let's cut out director. Director is no longer a qualified lead, and so on and so forth, right?
You know what? I think that's wonderful, Fab. And I think it's as simple and as obvious as it may seem to you and I think a lot of it falls down at a lot of companies. Because sales, you're supplying 1,000 new qualified leads a day to my sales force of 500 people, and nothing's moving forward. Well, okay, what do you want in there? We'll get you the maximum that we can get, and that's where the conversation needs to happen. Now, I don't think sales in a specific situation where sales is depending on qualified leads, they can't live without marketing, and marketing can't live without sales. So they need to work together. And it's true, Fab, and it all boils down to, what are we going to call qualified?
Yeah.
If you want us to qualify them further, if you want marketing to qualify them further, then you might be restricting the pool too much. And that's where some salespeople or some sales teams or some sales leadership will say, no, just give us names and phone numbers because we'll decide whether we can close them or not. But then you have to expect a smaller closing ratio on meetings, right? So if you're saying, okay, I want them a little less qualified, but I want my people to call through because I think that human contact can make a difference in finding out things that are just much harder to find out.
And I think they're both at extremes, right? The team, the sales team, let's say, that wants like this hyper qualified, like I know 95 things about them, and you're right. First, it reduces the pool quite a bit, and 2, it prolongs the nurturing process, right? Because if I can only send you somebody who's given me their phone number, their name, this and that, and it's like, and there's 95 things that I need to know about them.
You only get one lead a day.
It's going to take, and at best, it's going to take me a long time to be able to get that for you.
Yeah.
So then the flip side is like, you know what? As long as there's a name and a phone number, I'm good. But then the flip side of that is that, well, then my conversion rates are so low and my salespeople are getting demotivated because they're getting all these junk leads. And so there has to be a happy medium. And it's okay to start at one extreme, let's say, and move up and qualify as you go, or refine as you go, I should say.
Yes, refine as you go, but it's setting expectations and setting the expectations that marketing is not an exact science. Sales is not an exact science. But if, they're at odds of where they see things, if they're out here, well, then it'll never come together. But if sales says, and marketing at least agree to, let's start here and see what that does, and then we can change what that means as it goes along. And that's the beauty of a team that works well together. So let's assume now, okay, we have what we define as a qualified lead, right? Marketing is giving us these leads. Sales is like, okay, the sales leadership says, okay, this is what we're going for. Now, what's the role of marketing after that? What happens like after the salespeople have communicated or tried to communicate or even had a conversation, yet they're not at the end of the sales funnel? How do you see marketing's role in there?
Well, obviously, I'll give you the typical marketing answer, which is it depends. And it does, because there's a lot of variables. There's the quality of the team in the sales process, right? Like teams that have worked with you or that are working with you, you know that their sales process is pretty well defined and there's good steps. I mean, so if you feel there's a lot of lack at that level, if the conversion rates between one stage of the sales process to the next are very low, there's obviously a lot of work to get done there, and maybe we need to refine more. And so maybe there'll be more of a nurturing element component to it. But I think a big element that's often forgotten in maybe less tech spaces is kind of that role of we'll call product marketing. And so the role of product marketing is really diving deep on the product and knowing the product. Because I know, the role of sales is to sell, right? But if your product is complex, you need somebody there who can understand your product and that it knows how to market your product and to knows which pain points it talks to and whatnot. And so I think an important role is that product marketing role. So I think you'll have to, and the product marketer, the person or the product marketing team that researches, that helps the product team develop products that actually people want to buy, and that helps salespeople understand what this product is and stuff like that. I think that's a crucial role. And I think the other one is going to be maybe more of a sales acceleration, like kind of nurturing. Are there nurture elements? Are there reminders? Are there re-engagement ads, not retargeting ads, that we can target people with and stuff like that. So I can see how marketing could work at both levels.
Can I throw a little bit of it's not, I'm not throwing anything at you, actually. So in a consultative sale, right? Let's say where it's a complex service, where you need to have a detailed discussion. Is it not harder for marketing to have that interaction once the salesperson is engaged? So let's say like what you and I do. Like, I'm a consultant, you're a consultant. Isn't it a difficult thing to get marketing involved afterwards? Like if we're selling a CRM or we're selling a software, it's probably easier, I think, for marketing to get involved in the nurturing process. But how do you get involved in the nurturing process when it's a conversation and it's really complex and there's so many different factors?
Right. I mean, I think, so again, there's a few things. So let's stick with a product for 2 seconds. So one, I mean, there's this whole concept also of product-led growth. And so marketing could really go in and make sure that the product kind of almost upsells itself and things like that. And I think at that level, marketing can definitely help. But I think in terms of like a conversation and stuff like that, like you said, and like you talked about it quite a few times when we talked about these sales process, the reality is like the conversation is not, you're not having a beer with somebody here. Like you're still having a conversation that's directive, or you're trying to right? Like as a salesperson needs to be able to answer these questions, right? You shared at some point a whole list of things that not questions, but the things that people need to find out, or the salespeople need to find out. So I think, marketing can get involved if that process is followed tightly, right? The challenge becomes if that process is not followed tightly and people are having conversations, and some reps are really good because they kind of understand it, and other reps are not good because they don't get it. And then marketing is having a hard time getting involved. But I think if your process is well defined, and if the reps know which types of answers they should be seeking, and whatnot, and then marketing can get involved. And if we see, for example, and it could be as simple as, okay, the normal length in stage 2, let's say, of your sales process is 43 days, and somebody's reaching, let's give it a buffer, maybe 52 days. Well, maybe we could start doing some nurturing, or we can start working, or we can start working. So again, there's a lot of ways to look at it, but I think it stems from what you do, right? Which is working with that sales team to make sure that they know what to do at each stage of the process, so that other groups can come in and help out.
Yeah,
the big danger is that black box mentality.
Yeah, and there's also a point where it's very transactional in a product sense, very, very product oriented, and it's also very consultative at the other end where it's not a product. There's a lot of in between there.
Yeah,
the product where you need a little bit of consultative spice added to the process. So basically, what we're saying is that depending on what the product is, how consultative your sale needs to be, or how transactional your sale needs to be, marketing's role will vary quite a bit after you've supplied the qualified lead. So in other words, if it's more product oriented and very, very, as you said, the retargeted ads are very important to put it top of mind. Well, then it makes a big difference. I'll give you an example. Like, as you know, I'm a part-time, I'm a weekend warrior musician, and I look at different softwares. And what I've noticed is I've looked at one software recently, and I'm being retargeted like crazy.
Yeah.
But I don't mind it because I'm on the fence as to whether I really need this, right? So let's assume for a second, let's make this very real and tactical. Let's assume for a second that this product, rather than being, whatever, $200 software, let's say it was $5,000 or $10,000, right? Well, then maybe a salesperson would try to reach out to me.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they'd reach out to me on Facebook after maybe they'd say, fill in this information. Someone reach out to me and say, hey, look, what are you thinking about? So then marketing and sales are playing a role together. Let's face it, right now, at this point in time, this software, there are no salespeople.
Yeah.
It's all marketing.
Right.
Marketing does that well, but what we're talking about is that space in between where the investment is large enough and the sale is complex enough to require the involvement of a human being to interact, right?
Yeah.
And that's where I think the involvement really matters a lot. Like for you and I, again, realistically speaking, yes, you sell marketing and I sell sales mostly, but realistically speaking, if let's say someone, some marketing agency came by with us and said, Paul, Fab, we'll do everything. You guys won the marketing lottery. You never have to think again. But really, how far would we want them to go? How much nurturing would really happen? Like if I spoke to someone on the phone and I saw that they weren't ready right now and we kept marketing to them, it would probably have the reverse effect.
Yeah.
So my question to you, Fab, is how do you gauge, how do you know how much volume to put on that? Do we need an expert's opinion there, or is there some kind of formula? Is there a way of saying, okay, I'm going to turn it up to 2 now. Oh, I got to turn it back to 1. Oh, on this one, we turned it to 10. Like, how do you decide that? After involvement, after stage 0, after the lead.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And I think the way you decide whether to turn it up or turn it down or adjust the volume, as you put it, depends largely on your data, right? So if you're not able to collect data because you're going to run experiments, right? You're going to be like, okay, let's retarget them with Facebook ads, and let's target them with this very special nurture campaign, or let's just notify reps when this does that. But then you need to, when you're running your experiment, your marketing experience, you need to have like a scientist, like your hypothesis and how I'm going to decide whether this works or not. And you can have I've worked with clients and we've run statistical analysis and like on significance, right? Did this initiative produce any statistical significance on it? Because you want to be able to validate what you're doing makes sense. Because the reality is we live in a world where I mean, we've always lived in this world, but I think now more than ever is every dollar counts, right? And so if I'm going to be spending like $1,000 a month on this initiative and it's not moving the needle, well, I'd rather take this 1,000 and put it somewhere where it might move the needle. And so I think to easily answer your question, it goes on testing. And
yeah.
So you want to try stuff out.
Yeah, so it's all about testing. It really so there's no formula. The formula is we'll try a little bit of this, we'll try a little bit of that, and we'll see what works, and we'll keep doing what works.
You have to be scientific about it, right? It's not let's just throw a whole bunch of it in the air and
but I mean, but there's data, right? We'll try a little bit of this, we'll see what the data tells us. We'll have 3 or set 4, 5, 10, 15 parameters that we're going to look at. If it fills the parameters, then we'll go for it, and if it doesn't, we'll tweak it. Yeah.
So for example, let's say we talked about retargeting ads, right? Okay, we'll run retargeting ads, and we predict that it'll help salespeople move more deals or opportunities, whatever your CRM, from stage 2 to stage 3. It'll increase that because we're realizing that there's a challenge there, right? And so then you're going to have this analysis, and if you look after, let's say, 3 months or whatever, depending on the volume that you have, that you know what, it hasn't moved the needle at all. Then you could go back and see, like, okay, why did it not move the needle? Okay, well, no one was clicking on the ads. Okay, well, why was nobody clicking on the ads? Okay, well, let's say for you and your software example, let's say assuming there was a sales team behind it as well. Well, maybe it's because their retargeting was too generic, right? Because when sales spoke to you, you picked up and says, like, you know what, I'm just a weekend warrior. I don't know if $5,000 or $10,000 makes sense for me. And maybe the ad that they're running is just like, hey, sign up for blah, blah, blah. Maybe it would make more sense if for people in your situation, it would be like, discover these 16 weekend warriors that have like increased their happiness because their music is better. I don't probably better copy than that, but you know what I mean? Like, but then maybe you would move the needle more.
I like that. So Fab, really what you're saying, you know, and I think we see this a lot, right? With the small enterprise or smaller business. The big risk is you're going in there and you're saying, we're going to try different things out. We're going to create different data sets and we're going to decide from there. And that's probably what's scary, right? Because people are saying, well, I don't want to try things out. I want you to tell me what's going to work. You know, and I see the smile on your face because I know you felt this. So I guess the real thing that we need to convince people of is say, you need to work, sales and marketing need to work together. And as much as we define, and it's funny because it's a little bit the same in sales too. We define a sales process, but we're continuously tweaking the questions we ask. We're continuously tweaking how we do things. And that's our data set. The difference with sales is that you're paying the salesperson. He's there all the time. You're already paying him, you know, X thousands of dollars a year. So he is ready. You know, tweaking him doesn't cost you more. The problem with marketing is often, well, I want it to work right away, and this is what I want to do. So that's very interesting.
Yeah, and usually we get into that because it's when we're having that conversation with a client is because they've waited too long to address a problem, and they've put a lot of their energy on sales, and it might have been the wrong energy. Maybe they hired the wrong trainers or whatnot, and then at some point it comes to a point in the year where they're like, this is not working. And sales is like, we need more leads. And so then all of a sudden they're like, we need more leads. And then fine, you can find somebody who will run all your Facebook and your ad campaign and your Google ad campaigns and stuff like that. And they'll generate more leads. But what's going to happen? You don't know if they're qualified because at the end of the day, you don't have that process that goes, fine, we need to generate leads. And then we need to generate those transform those leads into marketing qualified leads, and then sales needs to confirm that they're qualified, and then they need to move them down their sales process. So I think the best way to move the needle is to start with that basic thing, like what's a qualified lead, how does marketing get those qualified lead, and how do salespeople then convert those qualified lead to customers. And then we could see, okay, fine, we know what a qualified lead is, marketing's not generating any, let's work on where's the problem. Are we just not generating anybody at the top of the funnel? Are we not are we generating a whole bunch of people at the top of the funnel but not converting them? Then that's when you can have a more educated conversation.
And Fab, can I turn it to money for a second?
Yes.
Like, let's say I'm a small, and we'll wrap up on this, and we'll talk about it next time if we need to. But let's assume that you walk into a client, right, and he says, "Look, Fab, I have an unlimited budget. You know, we make $100 million a year. I'm willing to spend $1 million on marketing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, is there, in sales, often we say, well, you're going to hire this many salespeople, you're going to do this, but is there a one point, like you have to analyze and say, well, look, I might not need $1 million, right? You probably won't say that, but you might not need $1 million. But obviously, is it one of those infinity situations where if you just keep working at it, you'll just build more that'll fall in further down the line? What do I mean by that? Like, okay, so we'll do these great ads, we'll be all over the place. But is there one point where you're just wasting your money, or can you literally use that to build something? Let's say this company has a tremendous growth opportunity. Well, then you're not wasting your money, I assume, because you're building, and you're going to build something that's going to help them spread out, right? Marketing helps you spread your wings. Whereas conversely, if someone comes in and says, I've got a $10,000 budget, you might say, well, you're a $100 million company, $10,000 budget. I'm not going to be able to get you a lot of qualified leads, right? So how do you decide what the investment should be in a realistic fashion?
I mean, there's rules of thumb, that you could go. I mean, there's a rule of thumb that says if you're an early stage company, you should probably invest 10% of your revenue, 10 to 20% of your revenue in marketing. If you're a later stage company, if it's like a very stagnant market, maybe 5%, 1%. If you're a static, if you're no longer a growth company, but you still feel there's market share to be gained, maybe 10%. I mean, there's rules of thumb.
All right.
There is definitely a point of diminishing returns, right? Where, if let's say you were talking before about your media experience, right? Like where it was just like everybody was just pulling the same blanket over themselves, right? Like there is a point where your marketing is not going to be as efficient because there's just the pie isn't just that big, and and so that's where you go into your business strategy and like, okay, well, this pie is saturated, everybody's has their piece. I'm sure maybe we can take a few crumbs here and there, and maybe we'll lose a few here and there. Let's build a whole complete pie, a whole different pie, and that's where but that's obviously a whole business strategy, not just marketing strategy.
Well, and it's a very good point. So I think we need to pick this up next time, because I think there's a lot more we could talk about, and I know you and I both have a hard stop. So let's call it quits for now for part 1, and maybe we'll talk more about this in not the next episode, but the after episode.
Yeah, next week we have your a sales engineer coming, and that'll be really fun.
Yeah, it will be fun. So thanks everyone. I think it's been a really good episode. I've got a bazillion questions I'm going to write down because I can't wait to do this.
Awesome.
All right.
All right. Take care, Paul. Bye, everyone.
Bye, Fab.